Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're at the final session of the summit, Advocates in Action, Part 2, Pandemic and Beyond. I'm Polly Shilga, your moderator. Thanks for being here with us in this final session. I've learned so much during the summit, especially that we are all facing similar issues in all of our municipalities. In this session, panelists will share their experiences as advocates during COVID and ideas for moving into the future. My role in APCSC is education and community outreach. I manage the social media, I lead the monthly slow roll, the apcompletestreets.org website, and lead calls to action, always with the belief that we will succeed. I'm a mom of 6 married kids, the grandma of 11, and I taught all of my kids, and I'm now teaching my grandkids to ride bikes, and all of them learned how to drive. But whenever the kids ventured out of the house on bikes or walking or driving, I always said some version of watch out for cars. I still give them the same advice, and I wish that I didn't have to. We all believe that we can affect change as advocates for streets that are safe for everyone, especially the most vulnerable, and we shouldn't have to live in fear of traffic violence. Last year, as we gathered at the summit, we sensed that the world was about to change. The keynote speaker for the summit made his presentation virtually, and many of the attendees bumped elbows, crossed arms, or gave the peace sign rather than shaking hands. We gradually realized in the coming days and weeks that we were about to face a huge challenge of a global pandemic. We're now emerging from a year during which we've been figuring out how to address these challenges, how to make our streets safer, and how to create space for people to move about in every neighborhood in our cities and towns. This has been the focus of planners and placemakers and Complete Streets advocates for decades, and the pandemic has urged us into action. The panelists in this session represent 9 municipalities in the state. They'll talk about ways that their towns have responded to the urgency of the pandemic, and they'll share what they've learned, what their towns have implemented, and their visions for the future. It's my pleasure now to introduce Anthony Tallarico, the mayor of Eatontown, John Sullivan, Bike and Walk Montclair's president and community placemaking activist, Kathleen Ebert, founder of Point Pleasant Borough Complete Streets, Kenny Sorensen, AKA the musician known as String Bean, advocate Neptune Complete Streets, Lisa Sarasol, chair Princeton Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, Nancy Blackwood, chair Red Bank Environmental Commission and Green Team, Pam Lamberton, my colleague and fellow founder of Asbury Park Complete Streets Coalition, Sean Ellis, Lambertville, founding member of Ride Free and Transportation Gap Project by Freebridge Mutual Aid, and Todd Pagel, former councilman, City of Metuchen, and president of Bike Walk Metuchen. I would just like to ask all of the attendees to please submit your questions to the Q&A, and we'll try to get to some of them as quickly as we can. And after all of the panelists have given their presentations, we'll open the Q&A. Anthony, Mayor Tallarico, we will begin with you, and we'll take it away. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, while I am getting my presentation started, I wanted to thank everybody for inviting the Borough of Eatontown to speak. I consider it an honor, and I'm very much appreciative of it. So I've been asked to speak on Eatontown and how we have engaged the public in our Complete Streets initiative, in particular, COVID and beyond. And so I'd like to just say very clearly, why was Eatontown successful? Eatontown was successful quite literally because we have more volunteers and fewer politicians. It is not the politician that engages and drives these changes. It is the boots on the ground, the volunteers that are so connected to their communities that have pushed Complete Streets in our municipality, and I'm very proud of that. If you take a look at the structure of our Complete Streets Committee, I think it's pretty unique. We have different organizations: the Shade Tree Commission, Traffic Advisory, Environmental Commission, Beautify, Historical, the Board of Ed. These are different groups that have some similarities, but they're really working in silos. But we focused on where they did have commonalities. For example, the Shade Tree Commission, one of their key focuses was our large arboretum, but they cared about a trail going through it, which ultimately connected 2 sides of our town. When Traffic Advisory cares about making our roads safe, of course, Our environmental commission advocates at the planning and zoning board meetings. And as you can see, each of these brought something to the table. So when you put them all in a room, you had probably about 70 or 80 volunteers that were represented through their chair people, through their council liaisons on this new concept, or at least it was new to Eatontown. We had also our zoning officer, our rec director, and our borough administrator. And in 2020, we proudly added people that the NJDOT considered members of our priority communities and individuals who use a wheelchair for their mobility, and individuals who are living in traditionally underserved areas such as apartment complexes. So what we did to get started was engage in community walk. These 50 or so people are not friends. They don't sit at the same lunch table. They probably never would have hung out together. But we got together and had a walk. Who doesn't want to walk with the police department, the fire department? Who doesn't want to take their dogs through the arboretum? And while they're all together, probably for the first and only time, while they were together, we talked to them about our initiatives. And when I say we, I mean our Complete Streets Committee, not me. We talked to them about our initiatives and why connecting the town was important. And when people drove down these main streets and saw 50 people walking, they wondered, what was this movement? What was going on? And while we were on these walks, we created lists of improvements around town. And financially, I didn't like to see that, but it was a great idea. They told us where the sidewalks were broken, where curb cuts needed to be made, so we can include them in our road program. They made it extremely clear that they weren't just out walking, they were keeping us on task. And that was a great benefit, because when they knew that they complained about a sidewalk, they would follow up with us. When is my sidewalk getting fixed? And it held the politicians accountable. Outside of just volunteer efforts, we use this planning grant initiative as an opportunity to merge volunteer enthusiasm with credentialed professionals. So we were fortunate to win a grant through NJTPA, Rutgers, and Sustainable Jersey, where they came in and worked with our town. And as you notice on the right, we have a map here. Eatontown is divided up by several state and county highways, and so it's very hard to connect us, but we wanted to create a greenway. And here are 3 of our large parks connected by busy roads, or divided by busy roads, I should say. And their goal was they helped establish a greenway so we can get people safely to all these parks. But we didn't just sit in a vacuum and have a bunch of planners and engineers give us a plan and drop it off. We then brought it out to the public. Our rec department engaged in a Greenway logo contest where we allowed members of the public, the children and their parents, to draw designs, which we are then gonna put in an emblem on all of our signage. So whenever you walk through an Eatontown Greenway, you see the same sign. So when you're on one side of town and you see this sign, and you're on the other side of town and see the same sign, you know that you're connected, that you can get from point A to point B. And it really shows you how meaningful the Greenway is. Here, this is one such component that we're working on. This is our Lewis Street component. Up at the top is a park, and across here is a park. And you're thinking, well, one street, what's the big deal? But to get from this park to that park, there's a major state highway that you would have to walk or ride your bike against. This section here is an area where the borough happened to own a piece of land, and right across the street was a property in foreclosure. We are now about 2.5 weeks away from closing on that property because of years of negotiation, discussion, and council initiative to actually have a connection from one side of the street to the other with a speed table where we can get across the street. But if this was just a few council people talking about making a connection, no one would have cared. But this was dozens of volunteers that came together, saw the Greenway initiative, saw the plan, had the basis from our professionals, pushed for it, and we are actually going to have this connection. And I hope when I speak to you next year, I can just tell you how great this is. But this came from volunteer initiative. We also were proud to receive the endorsement of the New Jersey Apartment Association, because equity is very important. It is a sad reality that some people are marginalized and some people don't get the same bite at the apple as everybody else. And in town planning, sometimes it happens, unfortunately, that those who live in the apartments are forgotten, maybe because of where they live along busy roads. And Eatontown wants to make very sure that that doesn't happen. So a lot of our planning deals with getting people from these communities, priority communities, into our parks safely so their children can ride their bikes to our ball fields, so they can walk in our parks. And I was very happy and proud to receive an endorsement from the New Jersey Apartment Association for our grant writing. So now, in particular, with regard to COVID, what did COVID do for the borough? I think it actually brought people together a little bit more. For 10 years, I would be at a council meeting adopting $25 million budgets and 3 people would show up. We've now have Zoom calls with 40 and 50 people on them, most of whom I've never met in my life, and that's fantastic. So what we've done was we've brought people into our planning process. They're more visible. If you look at the COVID effect on development, applicants before the Zoning and Planning Board have to do our NJDOT Complete and Green Streets checklist. We were the first town in the state of New Jersey to adopt this by ordinance. And when you want to come to our Planning and Zoning Board, it's a condition of an approved application that you must fill out this checklist. This allows everyone on the board to see what initiatives you are undertaking in Eatontown. How are you going to make your project connectable? We also passed a sidewalk ordinance. We expect every property in Eatontown to have a sidewalk. And if not, you're going to put money in a trust fund, and we are going to take that money and put a sidewalk someplace else. And that has been quite successful. Also, it's now an expectation of a bike rack from every developer. There is no project that's going to get approved in Eatontown that doesn't have a bike rack for employees, for the people cleaning at night, for the visitors to that establishment. As simple as it sounds, we are going to get a bike rack in every one of our projects. And lastly, the COVID effect on park usage. You know, we just put together a few flyers just to get people to these parks. A little brochure on the left where each of our parks is described, and you talk about the different walking trails in the parks. And on the right, we made a group that quite frankly doesn't even exist, but makes you think it does. Eatontown Park Walkers. Who doesn't want to be in an Eatontown Park walking group? So we are encouraging people to get out and walk in our parks, because as they use our parks, they have to get to our parks. Maybe they'll ride their bikes to our parks. Maybe they'll take their dogs, they'll take their children to our parks. And once they're in the parks, we can talk to them about our initiatives. Our rec department is being very proactive. We have old activities in new parks. Yoga used to only be in one park. Something simple as bringing yoga to an underused park got people to realize that, hey, we have a park on this other side of town. How do I get to that side of town? So we are using this idea of COVID, people who are eager to get out of the house now, pent up of months of frustration to get outside. And COVID has actually been a great driver on our initiatives. And so generally speaking, what I would say is what the borough did successfully is keep the politicians out of it, start locally, in your boards and committees, talk to the people. How can our group advance this, and then partner with all the different volunteer groups? So Complete Streets in Eatontown is not just some elusive topic, it's an expectation. It's in everything that we do, and Eatontown has been quite successful. And I look forward to sharing more ideas with you and speaking with you in the future. So thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much for that. The takeaway that we have there is community engagement, that in some ways COVID was good in bringing people together. I love that we heard last year that you had the Complete Streets checklist policy. Great.
Yes.
So now I'd like to move on. We'll talk about all these things more in the Q&A.
Thank you.
John Sullivan from Montclair Bike and Walk. Hey, John.
Sorry, everybody. Can you hear me okay now? Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor Tellerico, for that great presentation. Grew up down in that area, so I love seeing the great stuff happening in Eatontown. My name is John Sullivan. I'm coming to you from Montclair, New Jersey, and I'm going to try to get through as much as I can, as this is a long story, but I'm really here to kind of take the streets and pedestrian advocacy conversation towards a placemaking route that focuses on the importance of aesthetics and the importance of social cohesion across towns as the catalyst to kind of springboard these pedestrian and bike advocacy efforts. So what you're going to see here is much more of these structures and infrastructure that bring people together and make bikeability and walkability more of a thing that is possible. Who am I? I am John Sullivan. So I am the president of Bike Walk Montclair. I am also a community placemaker. And if you haven't heard that term, it gets kicked around a lot. I'll do a quick little framing real fast. But basically in the next 4 or 5 minutes, we're just going to focus on 3 main things that in my world and how I interact with the bike ped world, place matters to me more than anything. And secondly, not just demonstrating things, but establishing policy and process that allow those things to continue after the demonstration version is over is a huge deal to me. And finally, the thing that connects it all, as we just heard from there, community matters more than almost anything in this inclusive process, and not just fake, inauthentic inclusion, genuine inclusion, and having their voice be heard. Okay, so real quickly, just connecting the dots, as you see on the left there, we have the typical biking and walking circles, but as you move towards the right on this visual, you'll start to things that make it more inclusive because of your incorporation of things like the social realm, the arts, and the general aesthetics of place that and sometimes are missing. Of course, we know they're missing in the architecture or like the car world. They don't pay to that. And a lot of the bike ped stuff also can leave a lot to be desired around what it looks like and how it plays out in the physical realm. So my work is always trying to show how beautiful bike and pedestrian infrastructure can be and can add to the sense of place, not take away from. Just more generally is that this is not just my feeling. The National Bike Walk Coalition has added place to their language in the last 5-10 years. They've put out some great visuals on what makes a great place. So really seeing bikeability and walkability down on this wheel and how it relates to social ability and comfort and image is a great kind of tandem and way to look at our work. I just put up a couple quick pictures that, of course, when you see these, you are inspired. And these are the wonderful, beautiful places that make biking and walking to them something that people want to do and feel safe doing because of what they do to traffic and how they are all not just beautiful, but traffic calming features, which is a prerequisite for getting streets that are navigable. All right, so how has this been playing out in Montclair? Basically, I've really decided to say, of course, my work does stuff with bike lanes and with traditional bike infrastructure, but today I'm really focusing on some of the projects we've done that have gotten some good leverage and good buy-in in town as a way to say, okay, I see the connection now between how important this public space that the street is to biking and walking. First, our Paint the Pavement project. Over the years, we've taken different attempts to say, okay, how can we get traffic calming in a kind of creative and interesting way besides just physical friction and putting up speed bumps and bollards and things like that. And we had artists come in and the community, same kind of idea, community-led process of design competitions where the winner painted one of our main intersections where there was a 4-way stop, but people were kind of going through it too quickly and not knowing there were some accidents there. And this mural, you wouldn't think about it, just causes people to take an extra second or two to say, what's that? And really slows down this intersection to make it more of a human scale. And street murals are not anything new, but I think some of the more innovative things that we've been doing is painting other things like crosswalks and just giving it a kind of a visual, interesting look to cause people to slow down a little bit more, like the circular interrupters in that crosswalk. We also took those typical bike, that's a bike lot, what you call bike rack individual one right there, and painted them to look like pedals, people, and we called them the pedal people. And this was really a neat little thing that you had local artists come in and kind of transform what could just be a ugly kind of metal thing to lock your bike up on into something that not was beautiful, but also had local meaning. You see the M on there for Montclair and the diversity of our town. These are all over. Obviously, the community component was always been key. You see how many people came out and got involved in that. The more people you involve in a project, the greater attachment to place that creates. So the people want to protect it. They want to see it go. And the mayor talked last time about how the government a lot of times comes in and does something. You don't get that if something just shows up and pops up and they say, where'd that come from? But if you put it there and you were allowed to put it there, which a lot of people don't think they're allowed to interact in this public realm, all of a sudden it changes the dynamic on what you're allowed to do in public space. finally, what I want to say here is that other part is policy matters, is that as you start to see the mural fade over the years, that you want to instill something that lets other people do this. You don't want everything to be this one-off thing that was totally driven by one person or one group. So we got the town council to pass a simple resolution with this program that if someone else wants to do this again, there is a process. So a lot of the things that we're doing is this disruption of the status quo where it hasn't been done before. So we're kind of not just doing the project, but we are actually inventing the process by which projects get done. So that's double the work. But it's important because now if someone wants to come along and say, oh, I didn't know that, can I see that policy? I want to do a mural on this other thing. They don't have to knock down as many walls as we did the first time. The same thing has been playing out with our Parklet program, which has really been where I've driven in a lot of work, is that there is now on the books a resolution where on certain streets, parklets can go up, and if a business wants to do it, there is somewhat of a process to do so. As we all know, parklets are these little on-street parking spaces, structures that take over temporary or permanently parking spaces that allow pedestrians and public, it's a public space. And I want to see how long it took here. That remember that you have to have patience with this stuff. This is not something where you just go, I want to put a parklet up and it looks like this final one and the mayor's there cutting it. That was after 5 years. Started with AstroTurf on the street that was there for 2 hours. Then it was something that was there for 2 weeks. Then it was something that was there for a month. And then finally, by the time we got to the end, we had something that was much more permanent. And we programmed it and invited people to it and made sure that it was successful because we didn't want it to just sit there. We wanted to actually, sometimes people don't know what these things are. So you have to really invite them in a creative way to show how they are supposed to be used. So by putting live music in there, having events like pumpkin carving, things like this, and allowing the neighborhood to actually beautify these. We left it up and blank. You can see that this is the final version, but there was a lot of plywood there in the beginning that wasn't done. And we said, come on out, add your vision of what the street is. And business owners came out and added this, again, that attachment piece. This was the final one that we did on Walnut Street in one of our business districts. And it really was a beautiful piece. And it stayed up for an entire month and a half, but it is now down again. So the work is never done because it's always about the battle between parking. But I really love, this is probably my favorite picture that I've ever had of our work because it just shows the bike connection to place with so many people biking to this thing. There's live jazz happening in that parklet. You can see an upright base. This is adjacent to a farmer's market. And this was me standing back saying, kind of, I told you so in that one moment after years of like, this is what it will look like on a beautiful fall morning. And the business owners who were reluctant said, you know what, there are more people here now than there would be if it was just 2 parking spaces. And
Love that photo, John. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
it's one of my favorites. So we do have this policy now. Okay, so
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, John. There's your conclusion. My takeaway there was policy to process. That's a big one. And I think we all can learn from all of what you just shared, connecting people, community, authentic community connections. So let's move on to Kathleen Ebert from Point Pleasant Borough. Thanks, John. We'll get back to you with some questions later.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathleen Ebert, and I am the founder of Point Pleasant Borough Complete Streets. And I'm a local advocate. I'm a mom of 3, and I went to Rutgers to the Blaustein School of Planning. So I've just kind of have a background of studying these things and figured while I was raising kids, I could try to apply some of the things I learned and help the community I live in. So I'll discuss a couple of things about lessons learned from COVID, about how to interact with the municipality, or how I do, and addressing some of the equity issues in the borough. Through COVID, obviously, public events such as the one I'm showing now, like we had a big Earth Day festival, we were unable to do any of that. So it was great when we were able to do it. There was a lot of outreach and public education. People were really interested in safety and bike safety and how they could actually take part in all of this and different elements related to Complete Streets. But as we know, all of that was paused due to COVID. During COVID as well, the council, this is also a picture of a bike rodeo that was taking place at a school. The entire 3rd grade level in the town was taught some basic hand bike signals and different things, and their bikes were tuned up a little bit, and that was a great event that the parents really enjoyed. They were really happy their children learned some basic things. We also had assemblies in 6th grade for like kind of a brush up. The GM, the Greater Mercer TMA helped with that in the past, so that was great. So through COVID, a lot of people were out. They've had a renewed interest in biking and getting outside. We were biking all over town with the kids, and a lot of other families were as well, so that was great. Was kind of a little negative about the town. Our town never offered Zoom meetings for the council meetings when they resumed, so I was unable to go or participate in the meetings for a while, which was kind of sad. But I hope in the future, well, I hope this never happens again, but in the future, if this ever did happen again, I hope they would offer Zoom meetings. That would be a very positive thing. As Mayor Tallarico mentioned, in Eatontown, they had a higher attendance of people. You know, sometimes I can't make a meeting because I have a family obligation, but I could turn it on at home. So there's that. But let's see. There's been a lot of great things happening in town in the background. So this summer, this picture is showing a dirt path, and it's actually along like a brand new, $1 million turf football field. And they built this beautiful field and then left this dirt like walkway. And the school that those children are walking to is a middle school. So that is a route to school, and they did get, they arranged for grant money and whatnot. So they are going to build a sidewalk there, which is awesome. You know, it's the schools, the name of the street is School Street. So it's great that they're actually building a sidewalk there. And then everyone attending the sporting events, there's baseball fields, and they use it as soccer and field hockey and lacrosse and everything. The band uses it, and it'd be nice to have an actual walkway that's safe to walk on, and you don't have to walk in the street when there's puddles. What else is going on? We have, let's see, there were new sidewalks built on the way to elementary schools. These sidewalks in particular are going to Nellie Bennett Elementary School, and that's been great. I see kids on them all the time, and adults and seniors, that's get them off the street. The streets are pretty narrow, so it's nice to have that option to walk safely to school. And as you can see, our town is a very bike-friendly town. So I wrote the bike racks are at full capacity, but they're actually overflowing. And that was even with additional racks added to the school. But with COVID, it seems like there's just so many more people riding, which is great. So they're out and about and getting their exercise. And I wanted to address as well, like dealing with the municipality, and with COVID and not having Zoom meetings, I have been emailing and staying in touch. I also, the Point Pleasant Borough Complete Streets has a Facebook group that I maintain, and we have over 1,100 members, and it's pretty active. So whenever I see anything related to Complete Streets, I post, and we get a lot of back and forth on there. So that helps get ideas that I could present to the council. And I'm always trying to recruit more volunteers, which is a big thing. Having more volunteers would be great. So if anyone's out there that wants to help in the mission, that would be awesome. And I put this picture up of an intersection to kind of address a equity issue. I thought of, there's a picture of Bridge Avenue, which is a County Road and Route 88, which is a state road, that intersection still has no pedestrian signal. And it's always harrowing seeing people cross there. There's a 7-Eleven on a corner, and that corner, like the property behind it, has no residential. There's no homes back there. So people have to cross to go get, or the kids, they have to go cross that to get a Slurpee. And, you know, kids always like to do that, or snacks or whatever. And on the opposite corner, east corner, there's a grocery store. So I've seen many times people crossing there, people that, you know, only can walk or ride their bikes are trying to cross there to get their groceries and whatnot. So there's a bit of a, I view it as an inequity problem. So they really could use a signal there. So that's for the DOT. And another thing that was awesome, that our high school created a diversity council, and they created that to address positive change and social justice and equity in our school and community. So the high school, the younger generations they have their finger on the pulse on that, and they are ready to get involved. So I plan on reaching out to them in the future to see if we can work on anything together.
Kathleen, I think what you've illustrated is how each of our municipalities we're so different, yet we still are dealing with so many of the same issues. You have state and county roads, and then you have straight up suburban areas, kids riding bikes, and then a highway that people can't cross. So you have shared issues, and yet a very different type of a town from, say, Asbury Park or Montclair.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to move along now to Kenny Sorensen from Neptune.
Oh,
Kenny, you're on. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. I'll try to keep it short. I don't have a slideshow, but I'll address the equity issue right up front. Our biggest enemy is Memorial Drive, a county road with 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, 4 lanes, very, very dangerous road to walk across, impossible to walk along. That was built in 1970. It was a dirt road at first it was called Railroad Avenue, parallels the railroad. But it was turned into what I would call a highway, a high-speed road. In fact, the opening day, the first day they opened that road, it was used for drag racing, and 2 people died on the first day it opened. And it's been dangerous since, like a death trap of a road. But it's a road that I believe was maintained by the county as a kind of a moat to keep undesirable people from the west side of the tracks from walking or riding a bicycle, somebody without a car, from entering the more exclusive communities of Avon or Bradley Beach. So, I mean, it's been that way for 50 years, and it's been our quest to make it safe enough to walk across for the last 6 years. And I mean, what we've gone through with this road is I could write a book about it, but finally something is going to be done. We finally got some progress where the road is going to be redone. The road diet that started in Asbury Park on Memorial Drive will be continued all the way through our town. And we've seen the plans for it, and they're great. They have, it'd be much safer. We'll transform this area, turn it into a civilized place to live. So that's still going to take 5 years, 5 years for them to actually get it done. But it's something, and it was a long haul. Our intentions, like when we first started doing this about 6-7 years ago, well, we had a little girl, a daughter, Delta, was to make it safe enough for her to ride her bike to school or the beach. And it's nowhere close to that now. When I see pictures of Point Pleasant, all the bikes out front. We have 2 bicycles in front of our school, Woodrow Wilson School. We ride our bikes, we ride our daughter to school. Other than that, there's 2 kids that ride bikes. Not because they're lazy or it's too far. In fact, there's not even a bus service in the town. It's called a walking district. I don't know. But no, it's not safe enough to walk or ride bikes to school here. Dangerous place for kids to try to get around. So as far as the local streets thing goes, you know, it's like everyone said, every town is different, and our town is not like Bradley Beach or Eatontown or Montclair. It's I can only describe, it's not a beach town. I would describe it as a militantly suburban car culture town. You know, they don't want to be a beach town. They don't want to be a walkable city. They want to be able to drive fast. A lot of people that live here, that move here, the ones without kids, they say, I like to live here because it's centrally located. I can shoot to Asbury Park, I can shoot to Belmar, but you know, they're shooting down our street. Anyway, that's about it for us. Things are finally improving. And last year I would have said we've spent 6 years wasting our time, but now we finally have something to show for it with this improvement to Memorial Drive and possible improvements to the public streets. We've had a change of heart with a new mayor and a different police chief. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Penny, thanks so much. We heard your story last year, and you know, your honesty and graphic descriptions of the way it is when a road that's designed for cars separates a community. It acts as a moat. It's something that we hope. I mean, the administration with Anthony Fox as U.S. Secretary of Transportation, and now with Pete Buttigieg, hopefully we have a real focus on equity and moving people about and not having roads separate communities. Thanks, Kenny. We'll talk about that some more. And Lisa Sarisol, you're up next.
Whoops. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting us to speak today. We are an active committee that is appointed by our mayor and council. But frankly, it all starts with our community. And the picture that I have here on the screen is really where it all started, which is in walk and bike to school events. As you can see, these kids and parents and teachers and police are thrilled to be part of it. But we didn't really have a lot of safe infrastructure to do this. And in fact, this particular intersection is the subject still of getting a full-time crossing guard, because it's dangerous, and yet it doesn't provide for any kind of signalization at this point, though we do have grant money to install something, but it's going to take another probably 2 years to get there. But what I wanted you to see here is that the community supports it, and that's really where we got started in our committee in Princeton. So our committee does a lot of outreach. Our committee talks to many different groups, whether they are within the government or the local schools, the school administration, the other active committees that are volunteers in the town, and we listen to what people's needs are. And this picture here demonstrates a long-standing problem that has been the subject of much study. It's called this Robeson and Wiggins and Hamilton corridor that we started out by a 10-day demonstration back 3 years ago in what we call the Beta Bike Lane. And this was all done by community volunteers on a very low budget. I have to tell you that our committee has no funds whatsoever. So whatever we do, we have to apply to the municipality for our funding. In this particular example, we ran a survey online and in paper, and we got so much support and so much positive feedback that the town then undertook a what's called a corridor study for this particular experiment was 0.4 miles, and the actual corridor is well over a mile. I think it's actually more like a mile, 0.7. And that then lumbered on for several years. But one of the things that you see here in this picture is that we had to black out the central double yellow in order to give 5 feet of bike lane on each side. And the reason is because there was parking on one side of the street, free parking. Now, as yet another hurdle that we had to get through was the issue of the parking, and another task force was set up, and yet we were still trying to make this possible, to adhere to all of what the feedback we'd heard about how important this corridor would be. So we, as a committee, attend the permit parking task force meetings, we attend the planning board meetings, we attend the council meetings, we attend whatever meeting comes up that we need to make sure that our interests are going to be heard in this development. And finally, it would seem that by this coming fall, the beginnings of the improvements to enable these bike lanes are going to happen. But as I point out, this started back in 2018, and here we are almost in 2022. It would not be possible to achieve what we've achieved if it wasn't for the teamwork of these volunteers, the persistence that we maintain to continue our work towards getting these projects advanced. And I'd have to jump back a second to say that this particular route is something that's also used by a lot of people in our town who travel only by bicycle, whether it's out of choice or out of economic necessity. And we have done a lot to work with the communities that are traveling by bike only or by bike and transit in order to make sure that they are part of our activity. So we run surveys, we talk to community groups, we have liaisons in the community that are Spanish speakers, we have Spanish survey information and results, and all of it, as I went back to here, is dedicated teamwork and perseverance to move the projects forward.
Thanks, Lisa. One of the common thread again is community here, volunteers, lack of funds, and that we're all facing the marathon, not a sprint kind of mentality here, and having to embrace that, because that's just how it is, even though it's kind of small consolation when we are dealing with roads that are designed for cars. So moving on, thanks again, Lisa. Nancy Blackwood from Red Bank.
Hi, everybody. I'm just trying to get my screen into slideshow mode. So just 1 second, please. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, hi. I'm Nancy Blackwood. I am with the Red Bank Environmental Commission and Green Team. Basically, we're the one-stop shop to try to advocate for local issues with respect to trying to make our environment better for people who walk, bike, in addition to the environment in general. So what I'm going to talk about today is not so much with cycling concerns, because we do have some challenges on our road, but I'm going to try to address where we've done some things that enable more pedestrians to come into a safe place for pedestrians to be, as well as to what a particular business has done to create a sense of community. So the challenges that Red Bank has is that we have narrow streets, we have lots of traffic, which is typical for towns of the age of Red Bank, particularly at the shore. Cycling is difficult. Pedestrians sometimes are at risk during peak traffic hours because we have a lot of through traffic. We have people who are going to Rumson, Fairhaven, and Little Silver that are flying through, to get where they have to go. So, that is one of our challenges. We have a diverse number of residents that rely on cycling and walking, and particularly during the pandemic, we did see a lot of people who have now taken up cycling on a regular. So what we have is a, coffee shop called Coffee Corral here in town. It is at Shrewsbury and Dr. James Parker Boulevard, which is the beginning of our West Side area. And in 2018, they've been around for 9 years. In 2018, they actually were going to expand to make a jazz-themed restaurant, but they never quite got around to that. And then the pandemic hit. And so what they realized was, given the COVID restrictions, they had a wonderful opportunity to create a space for people to come by and have a cup of coffee, a place to sit. And they brought in a lot of entertainment. Everybody is welcome. They installed a community garden with the help of the primary middle school students. The primary school is located on the west side of town, so they would take a field trip and walk from the primary school over to tend to the garden every day, and every day it was a different grade. So the community garden actually looks wonderful. It's very well maintained. What they also did was they installed a mural, and that was designed and painted by the middle school. What Coffee Corral also does is they host art fairs and pet adoption days and other community events. They hosted Coffee with a Cop the other day, and which was really great because you would go inside, get your coffee, then come out and just have a talk with the community. The Board of Ed uses it to encourage residents to come and talk about the primary and middle school. So, it is a community-centered place. And right along Shrewsbury Avenue, we do have good streets where it's safe for people to walk. The more experienced cyclers actually do come. They have a morning meetup at Coffee Corral every morning, and they're out there. So this is on the west side of town. So from an equity perspective, it actually works well. The west side of our town tends to have families where the income is lower, and there's low-income apartment buildings too. So this is a way to get them out. And I do see people, from those communities coming in and enjoying the space, which I think is wonderful. They did not need to get any special approvals from town to do this. So that was a big plus in terms of your municipal budget. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Red Bank Broadwalk, which was created out of a sense to help the businesses during the pandemic. And there was a Red Bank Reopen Committee. It was ad hoc, but they did the logistics with the police, the OEM people, the emergency management people, and council. It was basically trial and error. And what we ended up with last year was this great Broadwalk. And they have streeteries for those businesses that are outside the Broadwalk. It was started open weekends during September. This year it opened again in May, and it's 24/7. And the lessons learned for that is that there was a need for more signage for detours for the cars that are coming, through town because there would be a lot of backup with people going to Rumson Fairhaven along West Front Street. But there was a lot of signage that helped and redirection for people. The streetery, I'm sorry, the tables outside Broadwalk, because the indoor dining restrictions were lifted, we actually have more open space in the center. And what I've seen personally, and I saw this last year and again this year, in the mornings, you'll see the kids, little kids coming out and they're cycling over there. In the afternoon, you have the older kids that are, we call them the Papa Wheelie kids because they're very talented. They can bring their bicycle, do a poppy wheelie, you know, like all the way down the Broadwalk, which I think is amazing. But from a parental perspective, like, oh my God, you're not even wearing a helmet. But, you know, hey, that's how it goes. So what I have here is just a video that will show Broadwalk. This was done last year. And, you know, every day we learn. And what we've also noticed from a business perspective is that not only the restaurants inside of Broadwalk are getting better business, it's also happening outside of Broadwalk. And because of the restrictions being lifted, the retail establishments are doing much better. So, you know, this is in the center of town. On the west side, we have the streeteries. One famous one is Tino's Mexican Cafe, but it's still the sidewalks are still wide enough for people to get by and then head over to Coffee Corral. We're doing better with the cleaning up, and you know, we're taking it each day as it comes. Now, what's happening with Red Bank, we're going through a lot of changes right now, and we had a BA that would actually, you know, really push to get things done. But right now, we're in transition, but we are working on our master plan to get updated, and we will be putting in complete streets type of information into the master plan with, you know, a lot of community input involvement to make sure that we have that, you know, mandatory that our sidewalks are going to be wider, mandatory that we do traffic circulation study periodically so that we can do more road diets and actually create real bike lanes as opposed to the sharrows, which is one of the challenges that we have. So we have sharrows, they're great, but they're not so great. So.
Nancy, that video is beautiful.
Yes.
I want to continue watching. I wonder if you have that up on social media on your Red Bank page, or if we can get a hold of that later. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
very inspiring. So
yes, it is.
Yeah, it really is. And once again, the sense of community. I love that what Coffee Corral has done, the community garden, and connecting the west side of Red Bank, which is a lot like the west side of Asbury Park. So people are moving back and forth across the city. Thank you so much. Now introducing my colleague, Pam Lamberton of Asbury Park Complete Streets Coalition.
Good morning, everybody, and greetings from Asbury Park. I'm going to speak on behalf of Asbury Park's Complete Streets Coalition, and I just want to tell you some tales of our advocacy. We started out 5 years ago as a group of concerned citizens and cyclists interested in helping to rewrite the city's bicycle ordinances. What we found were compatible people with passion to make our bike riding and walkers safer and more fun in our 1 square mile. While working on the ordinances, we heard about the state's plan to rebuild Route 71 in Asbury Park using a road diet design with new roads, surfacing and foundation and sidewalks and curbs and signals and signs and drainage and lighting and bike lanes. It sounded great, but at the same time, we heard the city council was rejecting the state's offer. We immediately began a year-long advocacy campaign to get the council to change their minds and accept the state's offer. To their credit, the council listened to us. And just this month, the state and the city celebrated the completion of the project. We may be spending a lot of time on this particular success story, but it's really pretty fantastic because we turned Route 71, which was a 4-lane wannabe speedway with double parked taxis and trucks and cars honking and jockeying for position to make turns. We turned it into a small city's main street with steady traffic flow, no competition for turns, with bike lanes, and with a little more enforcement, no double parking. Signals for bikers and pedestrians still have to be calibrated to ensure safety, but that's on our ever-growing list as a coalition. Also, to their credit, our city council saw the need for expertise they did not have to deal with issues we were bringing up. They hired a transportation manager who was our direct line to the city government. We now have an ally who actually has some influence. Today, we even have an assistant transportation manager. That's how seriously the city is taking complete streets. Also during this period, we joined with SAW, which is Save Asbury's Waterfront, to protest the construction of a private pool on the boardwalk. This club, because of its inaccessibility to our West Side residents, smacks of inequity. Besides being impossible for residents to reach, it will be a members-only club, and it will be economically restrictive, and most of the residents of the city will not be able to afford to become members. We also feel our beachfront should be accessible to all our residents. We are now advocating for ways to get residents across town to the waterfront without cars. We envision a jitney or a bus service or even bike service to get folks around and to the beach. And speaking of without cars, with our support, the city has instituted a scooter and maybe in the near future, a bike share program. These programs have not been successful in other cities, but Asbury Park's program is carefully and closely monitored and controlled by our transportation department. And we are successful. So much so that we are now questioning the need for the jitney service. If only we didn't need to bring all that stuff to the beach when we go. We find our role, a difficult one, I admit, is to educate the public about transportation options. While we advocate for very specific projects, we also promote general bike and pedestrian safety. We give away bike helmets and bike lights. We organize bike rides around the city and try to remain visible to protect our hard-earned positive standing in the community. If there is a festival or a fair, you can bet we will be there. Last week, we were pumping up bicycle tires in the city-sponsored festival. Another idea that has been simmering on the back burner for us for a while is to have more open spaces, namely open streets for pedestrians to enjoy. It sounds like this story has happened all over, but cars have been dominating our streets, bikes and skateboards have been claiming our sidewalks, and pedestrians on the bottom of that food chain are being literally pushed aside. We asked our transportation manager to ask the council to consider opening to pedestrians only parts of Cookman Avenue, which is our main restaurant and retail street, to eliminate car traffic. As you probably know, the knee-jerk reaction of business people on the street was, oh no, I will lose customers if they can't park in front of my store. So the council bowed to their demands. The council said, maybe we'll talk about it in the future. And then along comes COVID. And you know, I don't have to say anything more. We all know what has happened across the state and the country. And in Asbury Park, the open streets have been such a success, they will most likely be permanent. Everyone now realizes businesses flourish with more pedestrian traffic than with cars parked in the spots for very long periods of time. Thank you, COVID. If we have learned anything with our successful advocacy, it is this: one, advocate for very specific things. Don't generalize. Don't say, we want traffic on 4th Avenue to slow down. Say instead, here is why we need to slow traffic on 4th Avenue, and here are some ideas on how to do it, and here is how we will help. Number two, use means of communication, all means available to you: newspapers, letters to the editor, speaking at council meetings, have private meetings with influential people, organize meetings for people who support your goal and can help offer suggestions, go door to door, create flyers to hand out. And number three, be persistent, gracious, but persistent, reasonable and persistent, well-informed and persistent. Something we keep in mind in our long-term pervasive goal for our city is to be a complete and equitable community. If we accomplish our goals of better and equitable transportation, where will people go with this transportation? We need to think now about equitable destinations, equitable parks and recreation destinations, equitable retail destinations, equitable service destinations. But again, when you advocate, go for specifics. Don't just ask for an equitable recreation and park. Ask for parks for kids and adults with play equipment and jogging trails, and suggest locations and funding sources. Don't just ask for safer routes for pedestrians. Ask for signals at certain corners or lower speed limits on certain streets, or all streets if you happen to be only 1 mile square. And finally, if you all have any ideas about how to educate automobile drivers, especially tourists and out-of-towners, that your city is people-centric, not car-centric, please share those ideas. with everyone. It's something we complain and rage about, but seemingly are stymied by. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. You're absolutely right. We are dominated by cars, and cars have really co-opted our brains. But I think it's starting to change. In a city like Asbury Park that's under humongous transition for the last decade or more, we've seen changes gradually taking place. And as we continue to populate our streets with people on bikes and walking, and making sure that they can equitably access the city on foot or on bikes or scooters for that matter, and safely drive and reduce the dependence on cars. And we do want to talk about that some more later too. Sean, you're up next.
Hello, thank you so much for having us. Let me get the slide here. And does that look good to everybody? Okay, great. Thanks so much for having us here. And I'm Sean Ellis. I am representing Ride Free, which is a mutual aid project in the Lambertville, New Jersey area. Ride Free is a project of Freebridge Mutual Aid. And we chose this name because of the local significance. Every Delaware River town in the area has a bridge that people can cross without a toll. It also works as a metaphor for building a path to collective liberation, bridge to freedom. And mutual aid works to meet the needs of all community members, recognizing that we're all interconnected and deserving of care. One thing that you may ask is why a group that is providing vehicular rides to people is talking at a New Jersey bike and walk summit. Well, one of our goals is to reduce, maybe even eliminate car traffic in town, but the way that we do that is, the way that we're going about that is to build solidarity with people within the community by serving their short-term needs. As we've noticed with a lot of the panelists, some of the, what we need to be doing is creating a lot of community support. Without that community support, things don't generally get done. And we also need to understand deeply why, the perspectives of people who may not have access to a vehicle, so that we can advocate for them and with them. Mutual aid, as defined by Dean Spade here, really describes the work we do in social movements to directly support each other's survival needs based on a shared understanding that the crises we are facing are caused by the system we're living under and are worsened by those systems. So mutual aid focuses on helping people get what they need right now as we work to get to the root causes of these problems so we can address them. So Ride Free was started after we spoke with social service organizations in the area and discovered that transportation is a major area of inequity within our community. People need to get to places, to the grocery store, to COVID vaccinations, to the doctor, and we are here to help because the state has really dropped the ball on that. We don't have a lot of access. The public transportation we do have in the area is very unreliable and can be tied up also in eligibility criteria as well, which Ride Free does not have any eligibility criteria, so anyone can get a free ride. We serve the greater Lambertville area. As I mentioned, this area does not have a lot of public transportation. And we also have a lot of traffic flow issues and parking problems. So we really are focused on the long-term goal of reducing the number of cars on our streets. All of our promotional materials are in both English and Spanish. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking members of our community who are passengers with us, and we do see this as, the lack of transportation here as an equity issue. oops. So since April 2021, when we started doing providing rides, we've given dozens of rides to community members. We get people to the grocery store, again, vaccine appointments, doctor's appointments, food pantries, and many other needs. One gentleman shared a story with us that he's been without a car in the area since 2016, and he has had some medical issues, and his doctor told him recently that he was going to be dropped from their services due to missed appointments because of lack of transportation. So, again, we have a big problem here with transportation, and not everyone can get to where they need to go on bike or on foot. So our main goals here are building solidarity to address long-term needs in the community, to provide direct mutual aid for immediate transportation needs, and to work with local government and interest groups. We've worked with Bike Lambertville to revive a complete streets initiative, and we are also looking at transportation alternatives to make streets safer for all, and ultimately reducing reliance on cars through sharing to help address traffic flow, safety, and parking issues in our community. So again, thank you so much for letting us speak here today. And again, these are long-term goals. We see how even just small changes to the roads can really take a while. And so people need help right now, and it helps us build support and understand their perspective. So thank you.
Sean, thank you very much. Transportation truly is an issue, an equity issue, and enabling people to get where they need to go without dependency on cars. So, and you've addressed it in an immediate way, and also made the point that it's a long-term situation we have to look at. So, and I think all of us are saying basically the same thing. We have short-term, we have Pam saying we need to be specific about our asks, and we still also have to look at the big picture. So last up is Todd, and thank you, my papers all just fell on the ground. Todd, take it away, Todd. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for letting me back clean up with this phenomenal group of people. I'm extremely humbled to be representing Metuchen with this great group of advocates, and I really want all of you to move to Metuchen so you can help me do all the great things that you've done in your community. Thanks, Polly and the Bike Coalition for putting this on. It's really amazing. So I'm coming at this from a kind of unique perspective. I served on the council for a couple of years. I just ended my first term a couple months ago, and now into the advocacy arena, serving as the president of Bike Walk Metuchen. So I'm kind of trying to balance these two things, which is really kind of interesting. And we've seen a lot of success in Metuchen, but obviously we've similar struggles that you've all faced in your communities we're facing as well. So this presentation is going to be called Building a Strong Community Through Safer Streets. And I think that's really what it comes down to, right? We know that safer streets for bicycles, walkers, scooters, kids, cars builds a better community, right? It increases business. And I didn't know this before. When I joined the council, I wasn't like a bike advocate. I like to bike and walk around town, but I didn't know these things. And it was because of advocates like some of the people here that I became really passionate about it. And try to fight for these things in Metuchen and statewide. So I'm going to go through a couple just kind of success stories that we've had in Metuchen pre-COVID, and then talk about COVID a little bit. So we were able to. Metuchen's a very unique community. It's encircled by Edison, which is the 5th largest town with about 150,000 people, and we're a very small town with about 13,000 people. But with Edison, you get a lot of traffic going through. We have a lot of highways, Route 1, 287. Turnpike, Parkway, they all intersect, either Edison or Metuchen. So we get a lot of traffic, and we get a lot of through traffic. And we have had accidents. We have had people killed on our streets by cars. We've had people injured on streets by cars. So this has been a priority for the borough and the council and the mayor for probably the last, 10 years, since 2010. And as we know, the progress is a little bit slow, but these are some things that we were able to accomplish by a lot of hard work from our volunteers and also our council and mayor. So we did implement a 25-mile speed limit. There is only, I think we have like 50 miles of roads in Metuchen. I think only about 2 or 3 of them do not have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And those are kind of the ends of our county roads. And we're still trying to advocate to get those done. And we did this a lot with just the working with our state officials, Senator Pat Gagnon, Assemblyman Kara Binchek, Assemblywoman Nancy Pinkin, who's now the Middlesex County surrogate or something. She's not Assemblywoman anymore. We pushed for them. Our council president, Linda Koskoski, pushed and pushed and pushed. She was working on it for probably 5 or 6 years, and she was able to get it done. And she was able to get it done because we had members of Bike Walk Metuchen, community members, writing our senators, going to Middlesex County meetings and saying, hey, we want this in Metuchen. We don't care about the backing up of traffic. We had to talk to the chief of police because he was really worried about backing up traffic, but we were able to get that done, which was a huge kind of feather in our cap. Improved biking and bike parking in our downtown. Just like we saw a lot of your pictures from all over the state, biking has become really, really popular. When people have more bike parking, they tend to bike more, right? Especially when they can bike and in front of a business that's only a short walk away. So we included a lot more bike parking, and that's going to be something moving forward. Just as Eatontown did, Metuchen does require all new buildings to have bike parking, and we're trying to get covered bike parking as well as charging stations for e-bikes, which I think are really important. That's my son there enjoying a fancy Italian soda in one of our new biking corrals. So that's really, really, it's just, again, it shows that the community is involved. We want more biking, things of that nature. We did have a dockless bike share program. We use Limebike. That was one of the things I kind of advocated for in my first year as a council member. And it was super successful, and we got a lot of data from it. Unfortunately, Limebike kind of shifted their business model to scooters, and we lost our bikes. But the data that they provided in that 1 year was phenomenal. Now, when I go to the council and when we advocate for things, we can say, hey, we had hundreds and hundreds of people using these Lime bikes each year or each day. We need safe biking, right? We need safe crossings and things of that nature. So that's our bike parking. I did that. We did install some of these rapid flashing beacons. We worked with the state for that. That was really great. Some of our busiest crosswalks. I know those rapid flashing beacons are still not the safest thing. We need a little bit more, infrastructure improvements, but that was a nice improvement there. And then advocating for the safe passing law. Unfortunately, a friend and neighbor in Metuchen was killed in Edison, biking from Metuchen to Edison on his trike. He did have some ability issues, and he wasn't able to drive. So he would ride his trike around town, Oscar, and he was hit and killed by a truck driver in Edison. That was last year. And I know most of the people on this call have been advocating for the safe passing law. We worked a lot with our state representatives. My buddy, best friend, Councilman Jason Delia, has been a huge advocate for that. So those are some real positives that we've had before COVID. Now COVID hits, and we've all known that this has kind of been a catalyst for some really, really great things. Just like some other towns and cities in New Jersey, we did close a street. We have New Street there, which is on the left. You can see the biker going on there. We closed it for traffic on weekends, Friday through Sunday. And then when the winter months came, we realized that we needed to get some more permanent infrastructure. So we actually built some bigger tents on New Street, and we closed one way, making it a one-way street. So successful. It makes you feel like you're in Europe. And we're looking forward to advocating to make it a complete pedestrian plaza coming in the next couple months. So that's going to be a huge win, huge feather in our cap. Removing about 18 parking spaces is going to be a struggle. But we got to convince people that it's great for business, it's great for town. Let's get it done. And then on the advocacy for equity, I'm also a member of the Accessibility Commission. My father, who recently passed away, was wheelchair bound. So for accessibility for handicapped people is definitely high on my priority list, and in Metuchen's as well. You can see the picture there in the bottom right corner. Every town has this issue, right? That is actually a town sidewalk that's right next to our senior center. And you can see how jammed up it is with snow. So we've advocated for passing a stricter snow shoveling ordinance and sidewalk obstruction ordinance. So more, the police can enforce it. We can fine people for it. But also we're going to do a lot more education when it comes to clearing sidewalks. So that's a really big equity issue. that we're trying to fight for in Metuchen, right? Because we have, you can see there, those are some apartments that have recently been built. We're trying to build more and more apartments. More apartments equals more neighbors. And a lot of those apartment residents do not have cars, and they walk and bike around town. And some of them are older, and some of them, don't have the same abilities as everybody else. So we want to make sure that they can walk around Metuchen and get there safely. So those are some COVID ones, and COVID's gonna, just like everybody else said, kind of springboard a lot of our projects, which is one positive you can take away from this terrible year.
Thanks, Sean.
And then looking for,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Am I
Do you have
done?
one more thing? Yeah, your
Yeah,
time.
one more thing. So just looking forward, we're just going to keep advocating for protected bike lane. There's not many protected bike lanes in New Jersey. We want to advocate for one. We have a state grant for one on one of our busiest streets, so we're going to continue to advocate for that. More infrastructure projects, and then keep educating our residents. Please contact me on Twitter, Councilman Pagel, or bikewalkmetuchen@gmail.com. Again, just because I've learned so much just in the last hour from you folks, and anybody else who's on here.
Todd, you said at the beginning that you didn't know anything when you started. We didn't either
Very
in
little.
Asbury Park, but you sure sound like you know a lot now. And in fact, I met you on Twitter, and I've never met you in person.
Crazy.
So here we are.
Right.
But
Soon we will, though. Soon we will.
yeah, our focuses all are on reducing car dependency, reducing speed limits in our cities, and equity, accessibility. So much to share, and I look forward to continuing this conversation later with Deb, and then an ongoing conversation in the coming month, maybe even on a regular basis. But I want to thank you all of you panelists for participating, and for all the attendees. We are all activist citizens, and we all advocate for people-centric initiatives in our cities, and we're committed to the health of our communities. We recognize the need to create more spaces for people, reduce car dependency now and in the future. So with that, I think there isn't that much more that we have time to add, but we have 10 minutes or so for Q&A. Lauren, do you want to take care of that? You're there in the background, I know.
Yeah, sure. I can come on and read off the questions if you'd like.
Okay. I'm not sure. It looks like we only have a couple.
All
But
right.
people still share your questions now if you want to. Pop them in the Q&A. Attendees.
Yeah, if you do want to ask questions, now would be the time, but we've got a few here to start with. So the first was, can you share any tips on getting community buy-in on implementing micromobility, scooters, bike share, etc.? Often the public focuses on the negative, such as congestion, misuse, etc. And I think, John, you already had an answer going here. I don't know if you want to step in and start the conversation live on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think there's many different answers to this, so I would love to hear from everyone else. But I think over the years, I've learned that there's always going to be this inherent fear anytime you try to disrupt the status quo, whether it's micromobility around scooters or around putting things in the street that aren't usually there. So to warm the public up slowly to those initiatives by demonstrating in like an iterative form is really key. Because sometimes we're all activists and we want to see things in their final form. Like, this is what I want it to be like. I know someday it can, but you can't get there in step one. You can't go step 1 through 4 at once. So it's like, it may be less enthusiastic to you, but it's more palatable to the general public who is trying to take this all in as something new. So the smaller, quicker, lighter, cheaper version of something should always come first. So people go, okay, I can see that. And it has a definitive timeline. Oh, and it's going to come down in a month. And I'm not just losing this parking spot forever. I can take that. And then while it's up, you do all your work around saying, this is what it could be someday, but it's slow. I think that's a really key step in our work.
All right, thank you. Did anybody else want to weigh in on that question?
Would you refer to that as incrementalism or a form of that?
Yeah, incremental kind of iterative design where I would add to that is that each iteration that the public should weigh in and say, this is what I like about this stage. This is what I see that I like. This is what I'm worried about. This is what I still fear. I think I said it before, is that a lot of times these things, when they go up, they happen too fast and without notice and without input from the community. And that's part of the rejection of them. The more that you can say, we want to hear what you think about this and kind of allay some of the fears slowly, the better. Right. So
but we have our scooter share in Asbury Park. We also have worked on open streets, which are sometimes called closed streets. I prefer to refer to them as open streets. where certain business owners are just dug in and they're going to say no, or certain residents are going to repeatedly be the naysayers about scooters or even about bikes. And they'll refer to our streets are too dangerous for scooters. So it's not the scooter problem, it's the street problem. But nonetheless, some people are never going. So if you continue to engage, at what point do you just say, we're just going to do this? To me, there's a point, there's the working through it and engaging people. And then there's that, we just have to do this.
I think the incrementalism is definitely helpful, because if you look at situations like Hoboken, when they began their open streets or slow streets, they started off with 1 or 2 afternoons. I think it was Saturday afternoons, and then it became Saturday and Sunday afternoons, and then it went, bigger and bigger and more streets and more often, and you gradually acclimate everyone to the concepts. And I think that's what is so helpful in getting buy-in from the community, because they can see it in one place and then it's kind of like FOMO. Why can't we have it in our street too?
I just put something in the link chat. I didn't think it was gonna be that big a link, so I apologize for all that blue font over there, but this is something I always come back to, this image that I've actually shared with citizens too. It's kind of this law of diffusion of innovation, and it's been used mostly around like Apple products and technology, but it applies so clearly to advocacy work. And I'm not going to spend time talking about it, but I would really love people to look at this and think about how it applies to our work. Going Polly, what you were saying, that the people who are dug in are the opposite of us. They're at that other part of the spectrum where they are as dug in as we are dug in on our thing. So the tendency is that the conversation is always between those extremes, and that this law says that there's a tipping point that is achieved by focusing on those people who are just close enough that if you can get them, then things start to spiral. But unfortunately, too much of the time is that the one business who is the opposite end of the spectrum from us is overruling us. And that's why I stopped really trying to engage with that end. You're never going to convince them. You're never, ever, ever going to convince them. But there is the group that can be convinced and is much closer than we think. So focusing on them and then having them become advocates is the key tipping point.
Thanks for that, John. I appreciate that. It's hard to not be discouraged sometimes because the naysayers are louder.
I just want to add an example of that from Montclair. So I'm also from Montclair, and I'm on the board of Bike Walk Montclair as well. But we had some very, very loud naysayers on our planning committee that held up our safe plan, which is like a bike ped plan for Montclair for several years. And through the work of advocates in town, much led by John, we actually got to a point where we finally have that document accepted into our master plan. And the people that at least one of the people that was most negative about it has actually completely flipped 180%. So I just want to give some hope that even some of the people we think can't be convinced, sometimes through the process, they come around. And sometimes it's just those few people that you can flip and things really start to open up. So don't get discouraged if you've got, we all have a lot of loud naysayers sometimes in our councils.
Laggards. I love that term in the image.
All right, so we'll move on to the next question then. Excuse me. So the next is from Sangeeta. Hi, Sangeeta. And this one is particularly for John. She said, I love the pavement program. Curious if the residents have complained that the mural is distracting. If so, what has been your response?
Yeah, I started to write back to that one also. That distraction was not one of the things we heard the most. And if there was, that was kind of like I said, some of the intent was to distract just enough to slow people down if they're in cars. So some distraction was built into the model. The hardest thing with painting the pavement particularly was that paint fades, and the people who came literally fades, like not the project, the actual mural is different than a wall mural because of the traffic that goes over it. And what has been the detriment to those initiatives across the country is that the person or people who plowed through and did it can't upkeep it, or the person leaves, and like it actually works against your model if something is fading and aesthetically unpleasing. It was designed to do the opposite. So I would say the key thing with any type of paint initiative is to make sure that there's someone there to carry it on and upkeep it, because it can actually work against you. And that's why I showed that faded picture there. That's what one of our lessons learned.
This is Nancy. If I could add a little bit to that. In talking with our DPW person, he's been exploring different type of paint options that would be more durable, so that the, yes, it's something that has to be maintained. And yes, you do have to engage your municipality for help with that. But he's been looking into different types of paints that would last much longer with the traffic. So I forget the name of it, but I do have that information I can share with the team later.
I remember hearing Barka Patel mention that when they first started painting bike lanes, that they found in their inventory some old leftover tennis court paint, and that's what they used. I mean, it's brilliant because it certainly gets a lot of traction, and it's durable, and who would have thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be nice to have a visit to each of our towns and cities. All of us, we could take field trips, go have some beer, go have some coffee.
Love it.
Yeah, it would be really a neat thing to do. I mean, we're learning so much right now from one another in this short hour and a half. Do we have any more questions? Looks like we have.
We do have a few, yep.
Right.
Michael Kushner asks, how do you get funding for these initiatives, whether grants, tax revenue, donations, etc.? What's most successful? And it looks like Todd already responded a little bit and said that grants seem to be the only way that they can get things done, because the town is very hesitant to budget for infrastructure improvements. Todd, do you want to explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Great question. Money's always going to be an issue, right? We always have to deal with funding, and we've tried. We've had very strong pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure advocates on our council, and we have yet to still be able to budget money for those types of projects. So everything that we've done thus far in Metuchen has been grant based, or through our Downtown Alliance, which I know a lot of the towns here have. They get money a little bit easier. But yeah, that seems to be the trend, and I'm sure the mayor could talk more about it. But grants, always positive. There's so many out there, and I know there's a lot of organizations that help pedestrian and bicycle enthusiasts like ourselves find those grants. But then writing them is always difficult. We hired a grant writer for that. That's always an avenue that towns can take. You can advocate for a grant writer to get those grants written and provided. So. I don't foresee there being, line item infrastructure improvements, especially in Metuchen in the near future, especially with, budget deficits. So it's sad to say that, but hopefully we can continue to advocate for those things.
I have one brief suggestion with regard to infrastructure. Even if you made a small number, 5%, even if you said in next year's road program, we want 5% to be sidewalks. Something we did in Eatontown was we went to the people that had called us for years, why isn't this sidewalk fixed? Or they ripped out a tree but never put the sidewalk back. Even something as little as that. You can go out while you're bidding out your roads. You can bid out 300 feet of sidewalk scattered around town as an option. And even getting little pieces of sidewalks done, knocking on the door, telling those residents, we got this sidewalk done, and it was the Complete Streets Committee that did it, not Mayor Tallarico. It was your neighbors, your friends. Something tiny like 5% or 3% in a $500,000 or $800,000 road program could give you a lot of linear feet and sidewalk. And then you gradually creep in that it's not just roads, but incrementally we're going to do sidewalks. So just a suggestion.
I want to just, we're getting close to overtime here, or we're already over, but one thing, Anthony, I really took away from what you talked about was having the Complete Streets checklist as policy. And to me, I just want to kick this off. That's my one main takeaway here, even though I've mentioned some other things that I've appreciated all of you shared. Can we all share one takeaway that we had from this meeting? Is that putting you on the spot? You can repeat something someone else said.
I'll
Wanna
go
start?
first.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
I loved hearing Todd's comment of a snow shoveling ordinance, because we all went through a rough winter with, urging our public works to clear passageways that they weren't used to manning, so to speak. And we struggled in our town, just like everybody else did. And there was a lot of head scratching in the government, and I don't understand why, but if it has to take an ordinance to get everyone's attention, then I would love to see that wording. Thank you.
I'd just like to highlight John Sullivan's comments about when you're creating a project, to have the processes in place to be able to maintain and upkeep that project, because that is what, these one-off projects, especially if they get grants and everything, can often kind of, we saw fall into disrepair and not serve the purposes they need. So having that process in place as part of the project, for future maintenance is really important.
I really enjoyed John's concept of being pro-walk, pro bike, and pro place. I really like the placemaking aspect of it, and gave me lots of ideas for Red Bank. Thank you.
While I'm always going to be partial to Eatontown, I'd like to have a cup of coffee with Nancy at that Coffee Corral. I think it's a great idea. And I was even just thinking, even if you don't have your own coffee corral, you can get an ice cream truck to come to your park and sit there for a half hour and get people to sit and talk on some blankets and talk about your initiatives.
And I'd like to talk to, Mayor Tallarico mentioned before, more volunteers, less politicians. I'm trying to figure out ways to get more volunteers to contribute to the community. Also involved in like the high school band boosters and all that kind of stuff. And we're really lacking volunteers all the time. It's always like the same core people that do things. So ideas for in the future, garnering more volunteers is something I've been trying to think of. Thank you.
That was really hard to see and hear everyone talking about the equity component. Nancy mentioned it, Kenny mentioned it, Mayor mentioned it, everyone mentioned it. New Jersey is what, the most diverse state in the country, and that makes us stronger, obviously. But a lot of our diverse populations don't have cars, and they bike and walk. My parents live in Belmar, so like driving through Neptune, I can see that, and it's really great to hear that people are advocating for biking and walking, and because of that equity, because of those equity issues. And I think that's really important, especially what's going on in our country, when it comes to, race and whatnot. So that was really great to hear. So thanks for everyone who brought that up.
And Kenny, especially in Neptune, that road diet that's going to be going through down Memorial through Asbury Park is the last frontier. Hopefully that equity, that big piece, is going to help to bring our cities together. Anybody else? Pam, I think might unmute.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to get a hold of Eatontown's Complete and Green Streets checklist. That sounded like it might have a little bit of clout. And I love the word caricature. What was it?
Architecture.
Architecture. Architecture. I have to learn to say it. I love it so much.
I was just going to add that I love seeing Red Bank and Asbury and all the towns that shut down their main streets this year. This is very unique to this year, and it was a sad thing that happened, that this had to be the catalyst. But I think our work coming out of this is to use it as such, because going back to that innovation graphic, we did get a lot of people who never had get to experience what it's like to be on their main streets and on their streets outside of their car, right? So that video that you see of Red Bank of people being out is something that we've always done as advocate, like being outside. That's how we see things. But like millions of people got to experience downtowns and urban infrastructure in a different way last year. And I think it's our work is to kind of not lose that as we go back to saying what you said, Polly, like open versus closed. Like to us, that was open. To them, that was closed. And I love that you framed it that way, because I think that is what open should be. When we put cars back on it, they're closed. And I think we got to keep going with that.
So what do you think, Deb? We're over time, but this is such a great, lively conversation. Anybody else have anything to add? Or Deb, should we move on to the talk about getting together again in the future?
Yeah, I'd like to move on. We actually will need to wrap this up soon. Although I would love to sit around and talk through. I think we're just beginning to get that back and forth going about the issues. So first of all, thank you all very much. So I think we can end the official session. This has been the last session of the summit. And I really love the fact that this is the advocate session with real focus on what advocates are doing and sharing that information. For me, as the coalition, I'm the executive director of the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition, if anyone doesn't know that. This is really the heart of the work that we want to do. So to have you sharing all the experience and I learned a tremendous amount in just this hour and a half myself. And I've been talking with people, obviously, throughout the year. My thoughts now, because the summit is over, are going towards what we should be doing going forward after the summit. How do we leverage all the experience and all the information that has been part of the summit to keep this going? So just before we end this officially, I just want to tell everybody, all of the sessions will be have been recorded and will be on our website. So you can go back and look at them. And there are a couple that I think are really relevant to the conversations today. In particular, there's a session on lessons learned from COVID, which talked a lot about tactical urbanism and different experiences and ways to do this iterative kind of work and steps that John was talking about, as well as open streets. There's a session on equity and environmental justice that happened on Thursday. And there's just a number of others. So first of all, I would suggest everybody take a look again at the sessions if you weren't able to go to them, starting probably by midweek next week. We're going to start putting them up for you to go back to. So first of all, thank you all so much for being part of the summit, for your time, for your expertise, and of course, for all the work that you're doing in your different towns. I had mentioned this to Polly a while back, and Polly, I know, had been working on this idea as well, which is we come together sort of one year as advocates in the last couple of years to share our experiences. And there's so much, there's such rich experience, different towns. There's a lot here to share, and we don't really get a chance, I think, to get into more discussion and really sort of get to have that conversation between us. We tend to have these summits where we do like more presentations and share, and then we sort of go off into our own towns and our silos. So I wanted to know what you all thought about the idea of starting to form more of a ongoing, continuous structure where we can have these conversations. My thought, because I know everybody is so busy and we're all doing so many things, my thought was to try to start this, instead of coming at it to do a formal structure to begin with, if this sort of grew more organically. So trying to maybe have a either monthly or bi-monthly Zoom meeting at this point. We're happy to host that through the coalition, where we could either pick a topic or we could have somebody start out as the main speaker and really have more of a conversation where we're sharing experience, where you could come in with, I'm having this problem, right? I'm really having a tough problem getting a vote through my council, or I don't know anything about how to do a policy document or a checklist, or I don't even know where to start on equity. Like, how did you all do that, right? So clearly through this session, there's so many issues that we all share. And we need, I think, a forum at least to start to be able to talk and utilize each other's experience. The coalition is really supposed to be a coalition. We have this tremendous richness of experience, and I want to try to leverage that. So I'm throwing this out as an idea, as something we could act on to follow up this session. Going forward, it would be open to advocates. Advocates don't have as many platforms. Those of you who are on some of the other big forums, there's a Complete Streets Working Group, there's a Vision Zero Alliance that have a lot of variety of both advocates, professionals, city officials, state agency people. And this, I thought, should really be a place for advocates to talk about as volunteers, how do we work in our communities? How do we partner with our town governments? How do we do our community outreach? What are the tools and resources that people have found have helped them in their work? So that's the idea. I want to throw it out and just get feedback if people want to do this or not.
I think it would be great. I'm, Zooming or even physically getting together. I know that you just mentioned policy and grant writing and getting a vote through, those are serious issues, and there are tools that we need to get things done in our cities. So look,
I would certainly look forward to that. And if you wanted to have a topic to start the first meeting, Eatontown could host, or not host because I can't do technology. You could host, and we could talk about our Complete Streets checklist, and we can talk about how the volunteers did it. I didn't do it, and how it got successful. And then I'd be happy if you wanted to tell me your town and maybe put me in touch with one of your council members or mayor that might be kind of interested, and I can walk them through the process from one elected official to another and talk about how maybe other towns could adopt it. We had tremendous support from Sustainable Jersey, but it works well. So look, if you're interested.
I like that idea.
I love that idea.
All right, let's make a plan. Deb, do you want to take the initiative to connect everybody, or whatever next steps would be? I'll help you out, and we can reconnect and continue this conversation basically, and we'll do it in a organized way, starting with the
great. Yeah, I'm happy to initiate it. I know the summer is coming up. Let me just get a quick show of hands. Do people want to wait till after the summer, or would like late July be a good time? Or give me a sense of because I know it gets crazy after.
Why don't you send out a doodle poll for a bunch of people and see with certain dates and times? And
good idea.
Okay, I just wanted to get a sense if you want to wait, try to do this during the summer. Are people willing to do one meeting this summer?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Then we will initiate this. I'd also like to form like a smaller group, like a working group, it's kind of steering committee to help organize this. If you're interested in doing that with me, if you could email me at kagan@njbwc.org, that would be really great. So a few people who want to sort of begin to plan this for beyond that one session. Really appreciate, Anthony, the offer. I think it's a terrific idea for the first one. And I'm also happy to bring in anybody who is also, we could bring in somebody who was one of the creators of the Complete and Green Streets model policy to talk about their thinking around the checklist as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This was fantastic. And
thank you.
I'm really inspired by all the work you're doing, and thank you for being part of this summit. Feel free at any time to email me with your comments, your feedback. We want to keep this conversation going, and obviously I love to hear people's response to this workshop and to any of the others from the summit. So thank you. again.
Thank you, Deb, really for all of your organizing, and for Lauren from CEC and Nick. You guys really did a great job. I mean, a lot of hand holding for me, for sure, but maybe the others too. But you
Yes.
did great.
Lauren is the communications and community engagement manager for the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition. Thank you so much, Lauren. I could never have done this without you. And Civic Eye as well did a terrific job. Thank you so much to Nick and Crystal for really a terrific job in putting together our technology, our back end, and the graphics. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you.
will see you soon, and not just next year. So
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
to
you,
say
Deb.
bye.
Thank you,
Hate
Lauren.
to say
Thank you,
goodbye.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend.
weekend.